Hi everyone and welcome to Backtest Lab. In this video we are going to backtest the hammer pattern using algorithmic trading. So we are going to use Python and to see if this pattern works or not. A hammer is usually characterized by a small body and a long shadow. So if you have, for example, a long lower shadow, this is called a hammer. And you can see, for example, on this specific example, when it is formed after a downtrend, this is called a hammer and we have a reversal. However, when it is at the end of a long uptrend, in that case, it is called a hanging man. So if you have, however, for this specific candle, you have a longer upper shadow. So in that case, we can have what we call an inverted hammer. And similarly to the previous case, it can be formed at the end of the downtrend or at the end of an uptrend. So the pattern that we are testing is very simple. We don't want to check for complicated cases, and basically in the practical way we use this pattern with other signals, such as if we are in a support or resistance, etc. So the idea here is that we want to make sure that we are at a downtrend if we are checking for a bullish reversal, and we want to check these three candles. So the first one just confirming that we are at a downtrend, and the second following one can be a hammer or inverted hammer. So in this specific case, we can see that the sellers tried to push the price lower, but they did not succeed, and it is the bulls that had gained control. And we can confirm this information but by looking at the third candle. So the idea here is to enter at the opening of the next candle, the fourth one here, and to put our stop loss just here, like at the opening of the second candle. So let's see how we code this example. So basically it is going to be the same thing as we did for the engulfing pattern, and we want first to get the data. So we are using the Yahoo Finance API and we are using this function, and we give it four parameters. We give it the ticker, we give it the starting and ending date, and the frequency, if you are getting data by minutes, by day, or by weeks. And this is the line where we are going to get the data, and we are going to store it in this variable called data. So basically the result that we are getting can be a multi-index, and we are going to get only the first level. This is what's interesting for us. One detail is that sometimes we are fetching the data by day, by week, so we are going to get the dates, and sometimes we are getting actually the candles by minutes or by hours. So in that case, we are getting a date time and not date. So for both cases, this is our columns. We will have dates, we will have open, high, low, etc. So if we have date time, make sure to use the pandas just to convert our date time column. And if we have error fetching the data, we just print the error here. So let's try, for example, using meta. So this is our ticker. Let's say the ending date is today. We are getting the last 2000 days, and this is our function here, and we want to print the last 10 candles. So basically this is the result. Before coding our pattern, we need to prepare some functions. So let's see, for example, these first functions which concern one candle. So basically this first one is just checking if it is a bullish or bearish candle. So by comparing the closing with the opening, and return true if it is bullish, false if it is bearish, we can get the candle body size. We can check this body size is between a minimum size and maximum size. We can get the upper shadow and the lower shadow, or we can get, for example, the difference between the height of the candle and the low, the high and the low. We can also check, instead of checking one candle, we can check a set of candles. So here we are going to get a list of body size of a set of candles. We can check if all these candles belongs between a minimum and maximum size. Why actually we are preparing this? Just to make sure that when we are considering the pattern, we are not taking, for example, very small candles or very large candles that happen, for example, during news. And here we can get also the sizes, not the body size, and we can have some statistics here to get the average candle size. We can get the quantiles, etc. So basically the quantiles, for example, we have the quantile number 1, the quantile number 2, which is the median, and the quantile number 3. So if we want, for example, to consider only candles between quantile 1 and quantile 3, which are most of the candles, so we just have to pass those candles to this function, and it will tell us if they are normal candles or if they are outliers. So we can get the volume, etc. We may need this for process later. We can also check the trend. So we have our list of candles. We have here 3 parameters. So parameter number 1 is the percentage of candles that we are checking. For example, if we are checking the last 4 candles, we give here, for example, 80%. So that means 80% of these 4 candles has to be bullish or bearish, depending on what we are going to put here. And the parameter number 2 is going to be the height. So we can have, for example, all the candles bullish, but we want to make sure that there is like a height between the first candle and the second candle, and this height we can pass it as a parameter here, and we are going to count the number of bullish or number of bearish, depending if we are checking bullish or bearish trend, and if we are respecting the criteria of parameter 1 and parameter 2, so we can confirm if it is a downtrend or if it is an uptrend. We already discussed this function in the last video. So if we want to try, for example, our functions here, so basically the quantiles for our candles here for meta are these values: 1.32, 3.06, and 5.77. And these are also other types of method that we can add. We are not going to necessarily use them for this video, but just for the information. We can, for example, check each candle and see if it is a doji, if it is a hammer, inverted hammer, etc., and label each of those candles. As you can see here, I am using the candle type, and I am basing actually my analysis based on quantile number 1 and quantile number 3, and see what is the size of the body of each candle. And just for our test, we are preparing this function just to plot our candles, and we want to plot if we have a bearish hammer or if we have a bullish hammer, and we want also to plot when we enter the trade and when we exit the trade. So this is our function, and now we don't have any signal, so basically this is our chart. Okay, so let's now start coding our function to detect if we are in a pattern, in a hammer pattern, before actually creating the other function to test if we are going to enter the trade and at what time we are going to close our trade. So this specific function will take different parameters. The first one, of course, all our 2000 candles, so they are stored in a data frame, and after that we are getting actually the parameters of the trend. So we are getting first, the candle quantities. You will understand why we are using this. And we are getting actually these 3 parameters of the trend. We want to know how many candles we are considering to confirm that we are in a downtrend or uptrend, and what will be the height between the first and last candle of this trend to make sure that we are in the trend, and how many of these candles should be red or should be green. And of course the last one, this is just actually to print some details. So this is the first codes of our function. We want to label each candle by bullish hammer equal to false, bearish hammer equal to false, and we also put a label that is empty where we will store the results. So if we will find, for example, a candle that is a bullish hammer, I mean the second one, this candle, for example, we will change its label to true, for example, for bullish hammer. So now we need to loop through all our 2000 candles, and we need to get the 3 successive candles. So at the beginning, for example, if this is our first candle, we will get this one, and the third one, and we will check if we are in a pattern in these 3 candles. So until we arrive to these 3 specific candles, we want to save the first candle, the second candle, and the third candle. So as I said, we don't want to consider outliers. For example, there will be some specific candles that happen during the news, or there will be, for example, very small candles that we don't want actually to consider for detecting the trend. So we are going to use our previous function. If you remember, the check candle body size, we will give it the first and the third one, and we want to make sure that the body size of this 2 candles are normal. So normals, we want them to be between the first and third quantile, which is like 75% of all our candles. If it is not within this range, so for us this is not a normal candle, or one of them is not normal, so in that case we are not going to detect the pattern here. So after that, we are going to get the body size of the third candle and the second one, and we want also to get the percentage upper shadow and the percentage lower shadow of the second candle. So in this specific example, for example, this is the lower shadow, and we want to know if it represents, for example, 80% of the whole size of the candle or 50%, etc. So we will get the upper shadow and the lower shadow, and this is what we are going to do. After that, I will have to show the pattern again. So we want to make sure, if we are, for example, in this specific configuration, that the percentage of the lower shadow is more than 50%. So you can change it, of course. You can put, for example, here 70% or something similar, but for us we will put 50%. So if we are in a 50% here size and the upper shadow is less than 10%, we will consider this as a hammer. Sometimes we will have inverted hammers, so in that case it will be the opposite. So it's going to be the upper shadow that has to be more than 50% and the lower shadow that has to be less than 10%. So if we are in this specific situation, that means we have a hammer. So now we need to check the trend before, and we need to check also the third candle and some other constraints within this 3 candles. So first we will check the trend. So for checking the trend, we will give all the candles before. So this is our lines to get, for example, the last 4 candles or the last 5 candles, and we give it also our parameters, how many candles to confirm the trend, etc. So it will return true if it is a downtrend, and it can return also false if it is an uptrend. So let's consider only downtrend, and the same code actually goes for the bearish hammer. Let me show the picture again. So basically this is our constraints here. We want, once we have the trend, to make sure that the third candle is a bullish one. So if it is the bearish one, this is not a strong signal, so we are not consider this as a bullish hammer reversal. And after that, we want to make sure that the third candle body size is bigger than the second one. Otherwise, it is not a strong signal. And we add last 2 constraints. So we want to make sure that the opening of this red candle here is above the maximum of the second candle, and we want to make sure also that the third candle, which is bullish, closes above the second one. Otherwise, this is not a bullish reversal. So if we are in this specific situation, we will label the second candle as a bullish hammer. So we will put true here, and we can print a message, and we do basically the same thing for the bearish reversal. Now, after detecting the bullish or bearish engulfing signals, we want to enter the trade or decide if we are going to enter the trade or not. So for that, we are going to create this function which is going to check the success of the pattern. So basically, we will give it how many candles after the pattern we are checking, and what is our aim for the gains. And this is actually another parameter that we don't need for this video, but as you can see here, I am collecting all the data of all the trade that I am getting. So as we did before, we are going to label all the candles. We want to know in which specific candle we entered the trade and in which one we are getting out of the trade. So this is our code. It will start from here. So we are getting the first candle, the second one, and the third one. So after getting these three candles, we want to check if the second one, are we dealing with bullish hammer or are we dealing with bearish hammer? So if we are dealing with bullish hammer, that means we are like entering a long position. Otherwise, we are entering a short position. So basically, we are going to get the next n candles. So in our parameters, we give, for example, 5 candles. That means we are going to check the last 5 candles. And for this specific candles, we want to put a stop loss that will be here, which will be the minimum between the first, second, and third one. And our entry will be at the opening of this specific green candle, which is the fourth one. So basically, this is what we are risking. So for our results, we are going to use this another function for checking our results, and this function is coded here. And the function will actually check the next candle, we'll give it the second candle, the third one, and the next candle. So if we are, as I said, checking for the last, let's say the next 5 candles, we will put it here, and here it's just going to tell the function if we are going to checking for bullish hammer or bearish hammer. So if we are checking for bullish hammer, this is our stop loss. So the same code as I just showed you. And we are going to check for each specific candle, the first one, the second one, the third one, if we are actually hitting a stop loss or if we are hitting a stop gain, which will be our targets. So if in the parameter of the gains here, we are, for example, passing 1 hour or 2 hour, that means we are actually aiming for one size of the risk or 2 sizes of the risks. So once we hit a stop loss or we hit a stop gain, this is what we are going to return. We are going to say if our trade succeeded or not, how much money we gained or we lost, and in which specific candle actually we got out. So in this specific case, we did not hit a stop loss or a stop case. We just actually the third candle, actually the candle where we entered the trade was too far actually from the previous one, so we decided not to enter that trade, as I explained it in the previous video. And here, for example, you can see how much money we gain or how much money we lost. In this specific case, we hit a stop loss and we hit it in this specific candle. So basically, our function here will receive that result, and we will label actually the result on the specific candle, and we'll put when we will get out of the trade. And this is just for tracing actually all the trades and see how many times we hit the stop loss, stop gain. This may be useful actually for analyzing the data. Maybe we can go through all of this in another video. As you can see here, I am getting actually all the details, all the trade, and I will actually use machine learning for that to check or to give me like a strong signal. So after coding this free function, detecting the pattern, and the 2 ones for checking the success, we can test our functions here. So we need to define the parameters. So just for this example, I am saying that to detect a trend height, I am getting the average size of a candle from my previous 2000 candles. So it has to have a height at least as the average of the body size of a candle, and I am checking the last 5 candles to detect if we are in a bullish or bearish trend, and at least 50% of those candles has to be red or green. And after detecting the pattern for checking the success, so I am checking the next 5 candles, and I am making sure that I am hitting a stop gain that has to be also the average of the body size of a candle. So this is my function, and this is how I'm going to check the results, and I want to plot these results. So as you can see, we detected only 3 candles with this specific constraints because we did not consider like relaxed constraints. They were very strong, so this is why we are not getting too many signals. So if we are going to check, for example, let's say this negative signal here, you can see that we had a bullish trend, and after that we had the hammer, and after that the third candle is red. So this is where we entered actually at the closing of this candle, or the opening, let's say, of the next one, and it did not work because we hit a stop loss here. So this is how much money we lost for one share of this specific stock. So if I go back, for example, we can see also this specific candle here. Sorry for the zoom. So this is the bearish hammer. We got in here after the third one, and we got out after hitting a stop gain. Basically, for this specific example, we got only 3 signals, which is not enough. But for these 3 signals, we have 2 that they are positive and 1 which is a negative signal. If we consider, for example, bullish and bearish. However, if we consider only bullish signals, we have only 1 which is positive. If we consider only bearish, we have only 2, and you can see we lost money here, because at one point we lost $8.63 for one share, and here we lost 4.32. So how we are going to evaluate this strategy here? So this is our function here that will evaluate all these 3 trades. So basically we are going to collect all the gains, how much money we gained from this 3 trade, how much money we lost, the time of trades, etc. And the more important here are the criteria that we are considering. So we will assess the strategy using 5 criteria. So the first one, which is going to be the rate, and basically is just the number of success divided by the total. So because we got 2 positive trade, so we will have a rate 2 divided by 3 for this specific stock, and the profit factor is the total we gain divided by the total of loss. So it has to be at least 1, and of course we are not considering, for example, the spread, we are not considering the fees of the trade, the taxes, etc. These are all elements that are very important actually to consider in the trade. So we just want to get what is the value for the profit factor and what is the value for the rate. So the rate, when it is more than 50%, so that means we were able to succeed in 50%, at least 50% of our trades. And for the profit factor, it has to be a minimum 1, without considering all the fees. And we can have also another pessimistic version of the profit factor, which is called the pessimistic profit factor, which is going to be the adjusted average gain, as you can see how we calculated by the adjusted average loss. So this one, when you have, for example, a value of 2 for the profit factor, for the pessimistic profit factor is going to be always less than that. Some other trader, for example, they consider other criteria. So here I added just other 2, profit factor rate, which is the average gain multiplied by the probability of gains divided by the average loss multiplied by the probability of loss. You can also consider others such as the payoff ratio. So let's focus only on the rate and the profit factor, for example, and let's see what we are going to do next. For these 3 trades, if you remember, we defined actually the values for our parameters. So here we put, for example, the number of candles for checking a trend equal to 5, and for this specific values we got 3 trades. So if we change here, for example, let me put 8, so we will get, as you can see, more trades. If we put, for example, here 3, let's see how many trades. So we got only 2 trades. So depending on the parameters that you are going to put here, you will get actually you will have to evaluate your strategy. So what we want to do is we want actually to find the optimal parameters for getting actually the maximum number of trades, but that they are successful depending on our criteria. The criteria has to be, for example, the rate, the profit factor. So for each criterion, for example, for the rate, we want to know what is the best combination that give us the best rates. And for the profit factor, we want also to know what is the best configuration that will give us the best profit factor. So this is the part, for example, for detecting the pattern. So this is the possibilities for the heights, detecting the height of the trend. So let's say we will have different possibilities. The first one, which is going to be the mean, as we used the average. We can also use the quantile. Let's say the first one divided by 2. We can use the first quantile, the second one, and let's say the third quantile. For the number of candles for detecting the trend, we can use, for example, 3, 4, 5. I stopped here at 5 because we are using daily candles. So I am considering only a trend of 1 week, which is maximum, let's say, 5 days for most of the stocks. And for the percentage of the candles, so let's say the minimum has to be 50%, and after that we can test 60%, 80%, and 100%. So if I am putting, for example, 100% and 5 candles, so that means 5 of them has to be green if I am checking for a bullish trend, or red if I am checking for a bearish trend. So these 3 variables actually will define the parameters for detecting the trend and the pattern. So after that, for checking the successful trades, so I am going to use the same thing. So the number of candles that I am going to look through are going to be only 1 candle. That means 1 day, 2 days, or maybe 5 days, let's say 1 week. And the gain delta possibilities, so what will be my gain stop? So if I am using, for example, -1, so that, and here I am using 5, so that means I have to wait until the end of the last 5th candle. If I am putting 3 here and -1, so I have to wait at the end of the last, the closing of the 3rd candle. And we can use also the average, for example, when we hit a stop gain after hitting an average of the body size. We can use the same thing as we used here for the trend. Quantile divided by 2, quantile 1, quantile 2, quantile 3. We can use double the size of the average. We can use 1R, 2R, etc. So 1R, as I said, so if we are risking, for example, $1 or $1, that means we are going to aim for $1. If we are going to risk $1 and we are using 2R, that means we are going to aim for $2. So the number of possibilities combining these 5 variables will be 2,700 possibilities that we need to test them all for each criterion, for the rate, for the profit factor, etc. Now this is the last part, and let's say this is the most difficult part. So you don't need to understand all the details, but I will explain the general idea. So basically I need to go through all the combinations of my parameters, and each time I go through a combination, I will actually store the best results for the rate, the best results for the profit factor, etc. And as you can see, I am storing the best parameters when I am considering bearish trades, and the best parameters when I am considering also bullish trades. So for the rate, for example, here, so I will consider only when I have, for example, more than 50% of positive trades, and I will store different variables here that are not useful for this video, but I may use them later. So this is for the rate. I will do the same thing for the profit factor, the pessimistic profit factor, etc. So now let's go through our last function. Our last function is not this one, so it is the one just after this. So this is the parameter tuning loop for our function. So basically the general idea here, I'm not going to explain line by line, but the general idea is that I'm going through or I'm looping through all my parameters. So I have 5 parameters. The 3 first one concerns the trend. As you can see, the trend heights, the number of candle I'm considering, and the percentage candle trend. And the last 2 here considers to check for the success. So how many candles I'm checking and the gain delta. So I have 5, let's say, inner loops. So as you can see, sometimes I don't need actually to go through some of the parameters. For example, if I have the number of candle trend equal to 3 and the percentage candle is 60% or 80%, so I just actually go through. I don't need actually to test this specific case, because when I have 50% is almost the same. As you can see, I explained I explain actually all the details here. So you don't need actually to go through the 2700 possibilities. Sometimes depends on the stock and depends on the values of your parameters. You can, for example, go through only 1000 possibilities. So after that, so once I have actually the 5 parameters, I will give the first 3 ones to detect the pattern hammer, and the last 2 actually for checking the success, and I will store my results. So this is basically for when I am using different periods, but here in this video we are using only one period, which is the last 2000 days, so it is more than 5 years practically. And I will actually for each result I will check some constraints. So the first constraint that I'm putting here, that I don't want to consider, for example, parameters where I have, let's say, only 3 positive traits. So if it is the case, so I don't consider these parameters and I will not store them. So I need to have at least, let's say, 5 traits. So of course 5 trades for 2000 days is not enough, and depends on the stock. Sometimes, for example, you will have more than 20 positive trades, and in that case it can be like robust, and you can use actually those signals to enter the trade. Of course, you are not going to use only this. You can combine with the support, resistance signals, etc. So if you have, for example, only, let's say, 5 trades in your last, for example, 2000 days, so this is not robust and you cannot rely actually on these parameters. So this is why you need to put at least a minimum here, so it can be 20, etc. So let's just put 5 for the video and just for explaining this idea. So this is the parameters that I'm getting through these 5 loops, and for each criterion, I will actually check if these parameters are giving me better results than the previous ones. So this is for bullish and this is for bearish, because I want to separate the parameters when I am taking bullish signals and bearish signals as well. So let's go to the previous function here. So the previous function actually is very simple. So I'm not going to talk about this because this is valid when we have more than one trade, but the idea is just we want actually to check if the result that we are getting are better actually than this than the previous results, using these 2 variables. What is the current score that we are having from all the previous parameters that we checked, and sorry, this is the best score, and what is the current score for this specific parameters. And if we are having a better score, so in that case we will change our parameters for the criterion that we are considering. So we need to run actually this, for example, on Meta. As you can see, I am running it. Or you can, for example, have a list of samples of stocks, and you can check the best parameter for each one, and you can even change, for example, the frequencies. You can use 1 day, 1 week, 4 hours, etc. So let's say here, just for the example of the video, we are using only one specific stock and one specific frequency, and we will run, let's say, let's change it. We will make, for example, the number of success level rounds, we will make it, for example, 5. We want to have at least 5 trades. So this is not actually valid for this video. I made it complicated, but for explaining the idea here, we need to go through all the samples, the frequency, and see what are the best parameters for this specific stock and for the specific frequency. So basically I am running all of this. As you can see, some of the things that are not actually very necessary. For example, I'm using also the RSI, I'm using also the candle types, etc. So this is my parameters, the same I explained, and basically I am going through all the parameters and I am storing actually the results. So I will go back to you, as you can see, when the execution is finished. So unfortunately for this specific stock, we were not able actually to find a combination with at least 5 positive trades. So as you can see here, I run it actually with all the combinations, but each time the maximum number of trades, actually positive trades, is like 3. So sometimes it doesn't work on some stocks. So what I did, actually, I run it for so many other stocks, as you can see, and each time I store the best results. So for this specific stock, for example, so I run it on 1-day frequency, and I collected the parameters for the bullish hammer, and considering the rate criterion. So the results were 89% of all the trades, and this is the parameters of the trend heights, and this is the number of candles for the trend. 50% of the candles have to be bearish, and the number of candles for checking the success, and I have to wait until the last candle. So basically I got 9 trades for this specific parameters, and 8 of them were successful. And I measured also the profit factor and the pessimistic profit factor for this specific 9 trade, and this was the results. And I did the same thing for the bearish regarding the rates, and I got only 7 trades, and 5 of them actually were positive. So that means when you are using, for example, this specific parameters here, you are not going to get only 7 trades. You are going to get 7 bearish trades. However, you are also going to get bullish trades within these ones. However, these parameters are optimized for the bearish signals, and you can see I did the same thing for the other criterion: profit factor, pessimistic profit factors, etc. And I did this for different stock markets, as you can see. I think the idea here is that it is very difficult actually to find the best parameters with a minimum number of trades that we can rely on, and as you can see, for each specific stock you will have different results. So basically you are using different parameters for each stock, which means that it is a good and a bad idea. Because you will actually optimize your strategy based on each specific stock, and once you will have a signal based on those parameters that you found, you can decide to enter the trade. And if you are using different parameters, that means that you are not optimizing for the whole markets, and you need to find only one configuration of parameters that works actually for different stocks, which is very difficult. I already tried this, and you cannot actually have only one configuration for let's say more than 10 stocks. So another thing here, very important, is that you cannot consider actually only this strategy here. You can either change, for example, the conditions that we coded here for detecting the hammer, and basically you will get more trades. And you can combine this one actually with another signals, because this trade will work better if it is on a support or on a resistance, for example. You can also combine it with other signals, for example, the moving average, Ichimoku, etc. So this is just an idea of how we backtest this strategy, and for the next videos we are going to explore other strategies. So if you have any other ideas or you have comments about what we did, just put it in the comments. Thank you.